Today, I'm really excited to share tips and tricks with you about how to create culture intentionally in a remote or hybrid work environment. This is the question that has plagued so many leaders since they moved to a hybrid workforce. COVID pushed many organizations into embracing working from home and the remote workforce, and many of them were not prepared to do so. So many leaders that I've spoken with believe that culture cannot be created when you have a workforce that's at home, and so they struggle to create a culture in a remote environment. Well, in this video, I'm going to show you that it doesn't have to be hard. Nurturing culture is totally possible in a remote environment, and this video is going to not only show you how, but give you some key tips and tricks that you can use to nurture a remote workforce even when you're not together in person. So many studies since COVID hit has shown that workers prefer to work from home. One from Gartner said 83% of employees don't want to go back to work because working from home is working for them. And in that same study, only 1% of HR leaders said that they expected their company to go back into the office full time. So we are in the future of work now. The virtual environment is here to stay, and leaders are going to have to learn how to nurture and foster a workplace culture that gets results and drives employee fulfillment, even if we're working remotely. So in this video, we're going to start by defining what culture is, and then we're going to talk about how to nurture culture in a remote environment. I speak with hundreds of CEOs every year, and the problem with culture is that when I ask those CEOs what culture is, they all give me a different definition. There is no commonly agreed upon definition of culture, and so we're all talking about different things when we talk about culture. Culture is not about ping pong tables, and it's not about water cooler talk or Hawaiian shirt Fridays or whatever other things you do in the workplace to try and make people happy. Because the reality is culture is not about feelings, and the leaders who think culture is about feelings are doing things in an attempt to change their employees' feelings. Those things don't change culture. Let me give you an example. If you think that your employees will be happier if you give them something called Thirsty Thursdays, a happy hour where every Thursday they get together and have drinks on the company, then you will implement that tool, and that will maybe make them happy. They'll be happy on Thursday evening when they're having fun with their coworkers. They might even be happy on Friday morning when they go back into the office and they're remembering what a good time they had the night before. But the problem with those Thirsty Thursdays is it's not going to change the way people work. It's not going to change the beliefs that they hold about the meaning of the work that they're doing. It's not going to drive results. It'll create short-term feelings that make employees happy, but it doesn't sustain behavioral change over the long term. And that is the problem with most culture transformation efforts, is they're trying to change feelings. You often see this with team building. People will gather all of their employees together to do a team building exercise. You get everyone together for 2 days. Maybe we learn about our Myers-Briggs profiles, and then we go go-karting. At the end of the 2 days, people are really happy. But when they go back to work a week later, 2 weeks later, things haven't changed. That is why most culture transformation efforts fail. So what is culture? Culture is the experiences that we have which shape the beliefs that we have about the work that we're doing, about each other, and those beliefs determine the actions we take at work, and those actions get us results. So if at its core, culture is experiences that ultimately lead to results, then that means that we can have experiences whether we're together in person or we're not. I have an experience every time I join a Zoom call. I have an experience when someone sends me a text. I have an experience when I get an email. And all of those experiences will shape my beliefs about my peers, about the work I'm doing, and those beliefs drive my actions. So being at home or in the office doesn't change the way that you inform culture. For example, every quarter, our company gets together in a virtual Zoom call for an hour and a half to talk about the company's progress. And in that call, at every single meeting, our CEO takes a moment for gratitude. And he doesn't just say that he's grateful for the rest of the organization. In fact, he invites the employees to join him in his gratitude exercise. Sometimes he'll play a meditation, and other times he'll encourage everyone to take out their phones and send a text of gratitude to someone that is important to them, someone that they love, maybe someone that they haven't reached out to in a while. And then he spends a few minutes letting people do that task while we all sit in silence on the Zoom call in the company meeting about the progress of the organization. Now that is an experience. It's an experience in a virtual environment that leads me to have the belief that our CEO cares about more than just driving productivity. If he cared only about productivity and results, he would get straight to business in that meeting. But he doesn't. He pauses and takes a moment to elevate the way that we're thinking, the vibration of the call, and also to bring in something that is not even about work. It's about our own personal lives. It makes us feel like we are seen as people and not just here to drive financial results. It leads to the belief that we are team first. And that is one of the cultural beliefs that we hold at Culture Partners. Our purpose is to unleash the power of culture to inspire businesses and people to reach their full potential. And we do that through a series of cultural beliefs that work for us. Now, if that's a purpose that resonates with you as well, I encourage you to like this video and also subscribe to the channel to see all the videos that we have, not just about workplace culture, but also about strategy and employee fulfillment. So how else can you reinforce your organization's culture in a virtual environment? Well, whether you're in person or in the office, the 3 key tools that you should use to drive culture are the same. And those 3 tools are feedback, storytelling, and recognition. Feedback is one way to let people know when they are exhibiting the cultural beliefs that you need to drive results in your organization, and also when they're not exhibiting those behaviors. Storytelling is a way of sharing with the larger organization examples of moments when you have seen someone exhibiting the behaviors that you want to see that reinforce those beliefs, and also ways to tell when that's not happening. And then finally, recognition is one of the most positive and uplifting ways to recognize when someone is exhibiting the behaviors you want to see. All of those things can be done virtually as well as in person. Now, when you're in a meeting together and you're sitting around a conference table talking about it, that's one type of experience. But one of the ways that we do it virtually is through Slack. We have a recognition channel where anyone in the organization is welcome to go into that channel and recognize their peers. That recognition not only acts as recognition, but it's also storytelling. When I read about 2 other employees that are sharing recognition, it's a story that I get to learn about how people are showing up in the company, and it starts to create these shared cultural beliefs. Another way to intentionally craft culture in a virtual environment is through the conversations that you have in performance reviews. Performance reviews don't just have to be about hitting your professional targets and goals. They can also be about the kind of growth that you want to experience as a person outside of work. Taking time to ask your employees questions about the goals and growth that they have in mind for themselves and nurturing that, giving them time to develop those skills and find opportunities to engage in learning around those activities is a way to allow the whole person to show up at work, not just the employee, not just the person who is trying to achieve a financial target, but rather the person who is fulfilling the organization's purpose. And that is the last tool to develop and nurture culture in a virtual environment, is to talk about your purpose. Talk about it often and frequently. Talk about it enthusiastically. Make sure that everyone understands what your purpose is and that it is simple. Many organizations have purpose statements that are so long no one can remember it, and that doesn't help anyone. Leaders need to think of themselves as chief reminding officers, constantly reminding people of our why. Simon Sinek said many years ago that we have to start with why, because that why is the meaning that we find in the work that we do. There are many other tips and tricks that you can use to nurture culture in a virtual environment. Some of those can be Zoom happy hours and open office hours on Zoom where people can log in and get together and ask questions if they want. But one thing that I would caution you is that at one point, too many meetings on Zoom creates collaboration overload. Microsoft came out with some research that showed that so many employees after COVID felt like they were zoomed out. They called it collaboration overload because managers, in a failure to understand how they could nurture culture virtually, just started setting up a bunch of meetings on Zoom. And that took us to burnout. That took us too far in the opposite direction. So remember that nurturing culture in a remote environment is not about Zoom meetings only. It's primarily about recognition, feedback, and storytelling. If you want more information on how to leverage those tools to create intentional workplace cultures that drive results, then you can go to gift.culture.io to download the playbook that we have for you along with some of our research, or you can click on the link below in the description.